Hello and welcome to another episode of Heritage Talk on the Heritage Supporters Group. Today we have a very special guest who did the most outrageous thing at her university in Aberdeen. You may have heard about it. She said "Rule Britannia" in a debate about is it the army?
Yeah, that's correct.
I've read a little bit about the story, but I haven't gone into full depth about it. Do you want to give a bit of an overview as to how it came about?
So basically, it was during a meeting at a council, and we were debating whenever the British military should be able to advertise at freshers. And for quite a while, they've been banned off campus. And luckily, the bill got overturned. So to celebrate, we were typing in the chat "Rule Britannia," and someone reported me for it.
In the chat. So this is online.
Yeah, so it was like a Microsoft Teams call since everything is online because of COVID.
Oh, okay. So this was at Aberdeen University. This is the university you go to.
Yeah, that's correct.
So this wasn't even something you said out loud.
No, it's not like I disrupted anything. I just typed it in the chat.
Oh my god!
And they got me for discrimination against international students, apparently, despite the person to start the chain being a Korean Canadian, believe it or not. I remember he actually called me up after all the articles came out, and he was like proper annoyed that they didn't report him because he obviously said it to provoke them, but they only went after the British student instead of the internationals.
So what are you discriminating against exactly by saying Rule Britannia?
Yeah, apparently I was discriminating against international students. In the email, it said I should not use terms such as Rule Britannia, as international students don't understand cultural references and might find them offensive.
Right,
If they
okay.
don't understand the cultural reference of Rule Britannia. It's not exactly a niche reference.
This is something which we've had on TV at the proms for years, and is like a song which is known for like a long time in this country. So, I mean, has anybody gone this far before? Because I've never heard of. I'm sure people have claimed Rule Britannia is racist, but it's never been on this sort of level, has it?
I think it might have been because of the controversy in the summer that they thought, it was, I was saying it due to racial attempt. But how are you supposed to be racist by just saying Rule Britannia? I fail to understand what type of intent you need to have to say that. But the whole debate was that they felt that the British military would make international students feel uncomfortable because of the atrocities the empire committed. And I made a point in the chat saying, I don't understand why you would come to a British university, if Britain truly made you feel uncomfortable. So I got reported for that as well, alongside Rule Britannia.
And was it the Politics Society who also banned you as well?
Yeah, they banned me because I think afterwards, like a lot of people went through my Twitter and they went through everything I liked on my Twitter and tried to cancel me for it. So the Politics Society said I had a right-wing bias, so they would have to let me go, despite it being run by the radical left.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Was this led by one person in particular, or just unanimous decision?
Oh no! In the Politics Society, it was like a French international student who got me banned and tried to like push me out.
It's always the French. Always.
I was thinking I didn't want to say it.
So you reckon this is sort of a repercussion of the Black Lives Matter protests, perhaps?
Yeah, most likely. I mean, that's where Rule Britannia was first seen as racist, was during that case.
I guess the assumption by a lot of these people of that persuasion is that the British Empire was heavily involved in slavery. There was slavery in the British Empire, of course, but there was slavery in every empire. And they never seem to point out the fact that the British Empire was the first to outlaw slavery of all the big powers. I think that's true, isn't it, Adnan?
As far as I'm aware, yes. And I mean, bear in mind, we didn't actually finish paying that off until I think 2008.
Yeah.
So, it's not as if people in our living extant society have paid towards the end of slavery. So turning around and saying that Britain is racist in that regard is, I think, an absolute absurdity still. I mean, there is something to be said that certainly the Empire did a lot of bad things. I think it did a lot of good things more so, though. And, I mean, put it this way, there's a reason that a lot of nations around the world still use the governmental models that Britain put in place when we took over
it. And it wasn't just a case of outlawing slavery as well. We had to pay off the people that had slaves in order for the slaves to be free. So we didn't go bankrupt, I don't think, but we had to spend a lot of money to afford people that right. And that was hundreds of years ago.
Which, funny enough, I've actually seen people criticise that we didn't just emancipate slaves full stop, we paid for them to be free. Which, again, ties very much, I think, into this communist idea of just reappropriating something and reappropriating property, because at the time they were property.
So what about your conservative friends in the association and the student union? Did any of them come to back you at all? Or did
a lot of them? A lot of them did support me. There was a couple of careerists who were quite jealous. I got into the Telegraph and they tried to disassociate with me and get other people to stop being friends with me. But mostly, a lot of the conservatives in my university were quite supportive, which was great.
Okay, that's encouraging. Yeah. Because what I find with the conservatives at university I follow, well, the Tory ones in particular anyway, there are a lot of them which say they're conservative members and are conservative, but they're not actually that very conservative. Have you had this experience at all?
It's really true. I think I was the only proper conservative in my conservative society. A lot of them tend to be, well, definitely in Scotland, it's mostly people who just support the union. A lot of them do tend to be quite neoconservative or neoliberal in a sense.
Right. So,
sorry, can you repeat that?
So more Blairites, effectively.
Yeah. Maybe I would say Thatcherites, really, or Blairites. But yeah, they tend to be, I suppose, a bit more left wing in Scotland as well.
Yeah.
Because of the divide in that.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think Scotland is just that little bit more to the left than the rest of the UK?
Because I think a lot of people, again, they only join the Tory party in Scotland just to conserve the union. I think that's their biggest concern mostly. It's nothing else. That's their main priority.
I feel like in Scotland there's been a lot of hostility towards the sort of very middle class English Toryism, and to be honest, I do understand that to a degree, because there is a bit of snobbishness, I would say, snobbery in this sort of type of English character, which I was very much against being in UKIP. So I kind of relate to the Scots in that sense. Do you think maybe there's a bit of truth in that?
Maybe.
What kind of background do you come from? Are your family sort of more middle class or working class? Would you say?
So I'm from Northern England. So I would probably say lower middle class. Luckily, I wouldn't say in industrial towns like people do in Manchester and Lancaster. I live on the outskirts of the countryside, which is nice. But I wouldn't say I'm a privileged upper class person, if that makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
So, go on, Adam.
You mentioned you got evidently quite a few conservatives, even if they only are minorly conservative. It seems to me that there's a lot more of a conservative voice amongst Generation Z and young people in general now. Why do you think that is?
I was actually thinking about that the other day, and I was thinking about why is half of my generation Zoomers conservative compared to millennials and the older generation. And I honestly, this sounds so weird to say, but I honestly think it's the 2017 culture of YouTube. Do you remember YouTubers like iDubbbz, for instance?
Yeah.
For me, one of his content cops, I think it was on Tanimonge, was like my first like red pill, you would say. And it was a lot of Suma's first red pills as well. So it kind of went into the hypocrisy of words and why we hold these words at such high standards and a lot of that. And I think a lot of people just started becoming more right-wing after that. And again, that's not something like millennials had. They never had, that type of culture with them. So I think
probably the closest we had was Gamergate, and even that came very late into the whole thing.
Yeah, that was another. I think that also, got a lot of more people into the right-wing movement as well. Video games and Gamergate. I think it.
So did you have a particular red pill moment?
Yeah, I did.
What was it?
My first proper red pill was iDubbbz. That I remember. It was the Tanya Monge video where he went after like people who got triggered over certain words and stuff. That was the first red pill for me. And Leafy is here, I suppose, which sounds really weird to say, but it was like I suppose him going after people who just get so easily offended. I think a lot of Zoomers, became red pilled because of that.
See, I don't know any of these people.
Yeah.
The names, that's like I couldn't pick them out of a lineup.
So you obviously know Sargon of Akkad and Paul Joseph Watson. Are they at all similar to any of them? Maybe something like that.
I mean, this is kind of like a rabbit hole, and I don't want to like give the left any credibility because just because you go down a rabbit hole, you're not going to become a neo-Nazi. But it is like you start watching, maybe YouTubers like iDubbbz, then you go on to like things like SGW cringe videos, then you go on to like Sargon and Paul Joseph Watson and all of that. I think that's definitely true. And I think that's what's happened to a lot of our generation. They've came across that content, which is good. That's like one benefit of technology, I suppose.
I guess there's a slight difference between me and Adnam's generation and your generation as well, because we grew up in the good times when we didn't have quite so much political correctness. Late the 90s, early noughties. Yeah. You don't remember it being very bad. I don't remember. I remember a time when I didn't notice any, political Marxism at all.
I mean, there might be an argument to be the fact that we were kids, so we might not have noticed it.
I don't think so, because I don't remember it really. I remember being politically aware, from a fairly young age, and not noticing it nearly as much. I reckon it only sort of kicked in around sort of 2005. You started to see the beginning of it, I would say, and then it started to build from there. That would be my sort of rough.
I mean, ultimately, I think it's safe to say that most modern political issues stem from 9/11.
Well, that's true. Yeah, I remember that being quite impactful, even as a kid. Well, you're 19 years old, so you haven't even you never even touched the 90s, did you? So
no, I was born in 2001. So.
Oh gosh, that's weird. I can remember 2001.
I'm trying to think, Adnam, what was like the first sort of big moments for us that really got us politically aware? Obviously Brexit, but that was quite late in my political awakening.
I mean, I was always sort of traditional liberal conservative as such, around probably the early 2010s when I really started paying more attention to politics. In fact, I remember, I think it probably was around about 2008 when Barack Obama got elected in the United States. I think because of the worldwide coverage that definitely got a lot of people interested in politics.
I think for me, actually, going back, it was probably, we had a time when we had a lot of terrorist attacks, didn't we? And I think that was a big red pill for a lot of people, me especially. Obviously, we had 7/7 and things like that. And then the grooming gangs scandal, which really sort of hit the nail on the head in terms of something drastic needs to be done.
And yet still it hasn't.
No, nothing's been done. I mean, they have made some arrests, but it's still not being addressed nearly as much as it should do. I mean, immigration, that's been going on since Tony Blair got elected. It's still sky high. It doesn't look like it's going down anytime soon. Are these any issues that are these issues that you care about in particular?
Yeah,
do you have any issues which you are more concerned with than others, perhaps?
I mean, yeah,
as a Zoomer.
Zoomer.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm definitely concerned with immigration. That's kind of why I fell out of the Tory party quite recently. Is that when they first got elected, they made promises that they would cut immigration, because it is, a big effect on our country, such as we can see on house prices, for example. And what do? Well, they let like all these Hong Kongs in instead of prioritizing our people first. They also, I think, aren't they creating a new system to make getting refuge here a bit easier so illegals don't come in? I think I was reading something into that. But they've just gone completely back on their promises. I mean, that's the issue with the Tory party. They're all promises but no action. They just go back on everything.
I mean, with Hong Kong in particular, I think there's certainly more of an argument to be made there because there is a large British culture with Hong Kong as well. So assimilation will be, for a lot of people, relatively good. I don't think we should ever give it up, frankly.
But the issue is the numbers. It's not just, the cultural factors either.
So you're a Conservative Party member, am I right in thinking that?
Yeah. I don't think I'm going to renew my membership, though.
Because I was a Conservative Party member up until Boris introduced the lockdown measures, and for me that was the killer blow. What have you made of the lockdown measures?
Well, I was supportive of them, like when they got implemented last year, because everyone thought they would just last 2 weeks, right? But after a year, I think they're completely ridiculous, and I don't think they work. And I think I don't want it's kind of a bit like totalitarianism in a way. The fact that the government can force everyone to stay in their homes and have that much control over people, it's a bit scary.
But it's not just that, it's also the way it's been done, bypassing parliamentary review a lot of the time and placing sole power to the cabinet.
Yeah, exactly.
So are a lot of your friends sort of as conservative as you? How, if you were to give like a percentage of people in your age group who are conservative, or is it? I mean, most people aren't political, so obviously you can cut them out of the equation. But of the people who are political, how many would you say are conservative versus left wing?
I would say there's a growing amount of like left-wing conservatives and neo-conservatives as well. But there's also like a large growing amount of like traditional conservatives, or if you're American, paleo conservatives. So I would probably say half and half, to be honest.
That's actually quite encouraging, considering how left-wing a generation seems to be.
But that's just my friends group. I mean, a lot of like, for example, Tory lefties, if you want to call them, they won't associate with me. So that's like this excluding them.
Interesting.
I think where you've hit on social media definitely helping conservative spreads in your generation. I think the left all just got one generation ahead on that and hit on social media as it was coming up. It just took a lot of conservatives and generally right people a bit longer to actually catch on to how it worked in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like the left's dominated culture, I would say, for the last 10, 20 years. And it's funny when I speak to a lot of people my age, millennials, who I believe are a hopeless generation in terms of their political outlook. I think you'd agree, Adnan.
Yeah.
I very much feel like they live in a world in the past. Their mindset is still in the days of, Nelson Mandela and things like that. And racism is like about such a prolific issue. And it just doesn't seem like they live in the real world, whilst you've grown up in this world and you can see that a lot of it's nonsense.
I think a lot of it is like this generation kind of wants something to fight for, but there's like nothing, so they kind of like make up these like myths of like racism, for example, to be like, the older generation who actually fought for civil rights. Um, I feel like this generation is quite lost in a sense, I suppose you could say.
Yeah, I remember saying things like that back in when I was studying politics in 2016, and saying now third way feminism is completely redundant. And now we're on to effectively a fourth wave of feminism now, which is, I was thought I was even more redundant, frankly, and is almost taking steps backwards.
We have a sorry.
So I was going to say a lot of it is like taking steps backwards. I mean, there's solutions to solve racism now. It's like affirmative action, or more people of color who aren't white in the workplace. So it's like a lot of it's just discriminating against like white people, for example. I mean, it seems like today anti-racism is just like being anti-white in a sense.
Well, I would say it definitely is for sure. Yeah. We've got a comment here saying, as a Scot, I would put the rise in leftist ideology in Scotland down to people not realising the comfort they live in is down to those who are long dead. We have completely forgotten our roots. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's quite true. I think if you look at society, we've definitely lost the moral fabric of it. We've lost a lot of people don't even know a lot about our history, our culture, and our heritage. I think that's a big issue of why this like new generations just completely lost compared to the older generation.
Even the British mythology doesn't really get told much either.
Exactly, yeah.
There's how many people can actually name all the knights of King Arthur?
Not a lot.
Exactly. Even I'd struggle.
Yeah, I couldn't even name. I couldn't even.
How many people know what the Magna Carta is? That's what I'll be curious to know.
Evidently, no one in Parliament.
Apart from the people who want to quote it to the police when they want to go against lockdown, that's always fun to watch. Unfortunately, the Magna Carta doesn't hold much legal weight today, thanks to the numerous laws that override it.
Obviously, Scotland has a devolved government. Do you think that's partly to blame for the way Scottish culture has gone? And because obviously there's the whole thing with the West Lothian question, and England being the only nation in Britain not to have its own devolved parliament has created a lot of issues over it. And I think that's also created sort of this idea that England is ruling over everyone else, but a lot of people in England are quite dissatisfied about the fact of not being able to rule over ourselves.
I mean, it's quite recently. I forgot the MP's name, but he was the MP in Scotland who introduced the hate speech laws. And obviously, England didn't get a say in that. No other country did. It was just Scotland. But when the crime bill came out, he made an oath saying he would go down into the Parliament in London just to vote against it, even though it wouldn't affect Scotland. It's just completely hypocritical.
And the leader of the Conservative Party in Scotland is Douglas Ross, isn't he?
Yeah, yeah.
And he's a football referee. Do you ever follow him at all? Do you have any insight into him?
I've been on a couple of Zoom calls with him. He seems decent. He seems quite focused on fixing the union, which is quite good. I think I prefer him to Ruth, to be honest. It's just the issue is not a lot of people know about him unless you're into Scottish politics. Like a lot of people in England have no idea who he is.
How conservative would you say he is on the conservative scale?
There's not a lot of information about his socially conservative views. I remember in the Zoom call, someone asked him about what he thought about what happened in Congress in America, and he called them terrorists, which was pretty cringe.
Very cringe.
Yeah, but maybe that was trying to be moderate. I don't know. But he seems like a decent guy. I mean, he used to study agriculture, I think at college or something, and he wanted to be a farmer. So I think he has a concern for the countryside in a way. But I honestly don't know anything about his socially conservative beliefs.
So what were your history lessons like at school and college? In fact, sorry, what do you study first at university?
I study history and politics.
History and politics. Okay, so you can tell us at the school level and the university level. So what start at school? Did they teach you about the things which we would hope they would teach you about?
Well, a lot of our class back at like school was quite patriotic. So our Scouse teacher, he never talked badly about Britain. So we learned about the age of discovery in America. We learned about modern Britain, so trade unions, Northern Ireland, and all of that. And we did warfare as well, so we learned about Nelson, Battle of Waterloo, and so on. And then college, we did American history, South Africa, and warfare again. There was no bias either in that. And then in my university, thankfully, there's no bias either, which is quite surprising. Really, it's not. We're not taught to hate our country, luckily, which is quite good.
So
when I did history at grammar school, there wasn't. We sort of skipped over a lot of stuff. It wasn't necessarily anti-British, but it just there was not really any mention of the empire. Well, we didn't get taught about Napoleon and Nelson and so forth really at all. I mean,
that was the same at my school.
God forbid anyone mentioned the Zulu War. But again, how many people actually know anything about the Zulu War apart from the film Zulu?
I mean, most people, when they think, like most of my generation, when they think of the Zulu War, they think that we massacred the blacks and the Africans, and we did it for no reason, and that it wasn't a fair war, even though there was a couple of battles which we won against us. Yeah.
How do you feel about the British Empire in general?
I'm quite positive about it. Like, if you look into empires during the time when the British Empire was around, it was probably one of the best. Like, if you compare it to the Belgium Congo, it was just far more moral. The Japanese Empire and so on. People like to talk about it as like an evil empire that went around, causing chaos wherever it landed, and that's just completely untrue. Compared to what other empires were doing at the time. I mean, for example, if you look at the discovery of America, one of the main reasons Britain actually went to America in the first place was because, well, one, they didn't like the Spanish, and two, they also didn't like how the Spanish were treating the Native Americans, and they wanted to treat them better. It's also
Right, it wasn't exactly much better, but it was still a little bit.
Yeah, it was better than the Spanish. I mean, the Spanish, obviously, they used to like cut off Native Americans' hands and all of that. It was far better than the Spanish, to put it that way.
That said, speaking of America, I think that might be partly to blame for why there's this anti-British Empire sentiment in modern day, because obviously a lot of British culture has become more and more Americanized over the years. So you can see this especially with Black Lives Matter, the idea of trying to transplant American race relations into the UK.
Yeah.
But I think people trying to do that with the idea of the British Empire, obviously there's a very anti-British Empire sentiment in the United States for fairly obvious reasons. The war of colonial ingratitude did kind of stir that one up. But that trying to carry that forward doesn't show both perspectives. Do you think there's a way we can sort of try and bring back the British perspective as such?
Yeah, I think the best way we can do that is like for example, the thing that made me feel most proud about the Empire was figures such as Lord Nelson, for example, and the contributions he made to the Navy, and Duke of Wellington as well. I think if we start teaching those figures again in schools and make those courses compulsory, then I think we can bring patriotism back into Britain. But if we don't do that, then it's going to lead people into believing all these things that Britain was evil. I mean, for example, Black Lives Matter in the UK is now trying to teach people that one of our queens was black, even though she wasn't, just because of her.
Yeah.
She might have had a great.
She was like one of the. Yeah, she had a Moorish great uncle or something.
Yeah, that's it.
And that does. It's absolutely ridiculous trying to portray historical figures in that manner, I think. There are certain ways it can be done. If you've ever read The Winter King by Bernard Cornwell, very, very good book about King Arthur and places it in a more realistic setting. And I believe it's Lancelot that he makes black, as in, but it's also makes sense in that he was a former Roman legionary from North Africa, which again fits into the setting, but it's made that he stands out. It's not as if it's not portraying Anglo-Saxon Britain as having the same multicultural and multi-ethnic diversity that is in modern Britain. And this is why I try to say that I think there are ways it can be done historically tastefully.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think the left, well, I don't want to say the left, I don't think it's being done in that way in general.
Yeah. Like, I'm all for, like, teaching figures like Mary Seacole, because she played a massive part in the Crimean War. But, like, to teach, like, children that, you know, that era was just as multicultural as Britain now, it's just completely false and not grounded in actual historical truth.
And similarly, rather than co-opting historical bits of British culture or any culture, it does beg the question of why not tell stories from other cultures. I would love to see a sort of Game of Thrones style, I say Game of Thrones style, but this sort of political drama about the rise of King Ketshwayo before the Zulu War, because that's a fascinating story. But no, instead we've got to make a British Queen black historically just because.
Precisely.
I mean, you've seen there's been a lot of enthusiasm for shows like The Crown. I've never seen it before. And have you seen that before? Either of you?
No.
Bits of it.
Bits of it. Would you say it's just at all historically accurate?
Really, I think it's trying to focus more on the personal drama rather than anything though.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, there's so much history which I didn't learn about till later on. Things like the Reformation. I never did that in history class. And the Royalists versus the Parliamentarians, Oliver Cromwell. It seems like, to me, I sort of envy America a lot because they looked at British history and basically turned it into a country in terms of law and with things like the Bill of Rights and Constitution. And I feel that it's a shame in a way because British history is so rich and interesting and good, and yet it doesn't really proliferate into modern day Britain. We haven't been able to put our, like Magna Carta, it doesn't exist today, basically, in terms of the laws we have. It seemed, and you'd think someone like Boris Johnson, who's studied classicism at university, he knows about, Greek thought and our identity and our history and everything, and yet he's totally trampled over all of our fundamental foundings as a country, I guess. In terms of liberty, free speech, hate crime laws, hate speech laws. Who has said anything against that in Parliament? Ben Bradley, perhaps, maybe. I'm not sure. That's the only person I can possibly think of. He seems to be the only Conservative who is talking about issues to do with free speech and liberty. And there's one other good Tory as well who is good on the equality issue. Do you remember his name? It's Philip something. He's very good also, because in the Tory party, and we actually have a position which is equalities and women minister, not equality. It's women and equalities, which to me is so ridiculous. Do you want to comment on that at all?
I always think about it like this. I'm honestly convinced that like the Conservatives are just Labour but capitalist. I mean that's about the biggest difference I can think between them. I mean, the Conservatives are just like culturally left wing, and that's the issue with them. It's that they're never going to help this country, and they're only going to help the pockets of big businesses and their donors. Really, that's about it. I mean, that's why they like immigration, for example, because obviously they can pay workers less. They don't actually care about the working class and the people, and they're not going to care about our freedom of speech either if it means
What are like so your well not just your but also your sort of friends and so forth views on Boris one, but also just the Conservative government we have.
So last year I voted for the Conservatives in the last election, and I was like completely white pilled about them. I was thinking, we've actually got a Conservative government again. They're gonna prioritize the people first. They're actually for the working class and so on. And I was convinced that we actually did have that government. Because obviously they
when Boris Johnson got elected.
Yeah, exactly. And then a year later, it's just this government just only cares about money. They only care about their careers, and they only care about big businesses and so on. They don't actually care about the people, and it's awful. It's awful.
It's almost like Conservative supporters got hoodwinked as much as Joe Biden supporters did.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, is there a difference between them? Who knows?
Boris Johnson can walk upstairs.
Well, that's one benefit, I guess.
At least he can. Well, he kind of speaks better than Biden. He is a babbling buffoon,
I love his line when the Olympics were coming to London, and he talked about how ping pong was invented in Britain, and it was on the dining tables of families in Britain. And back then, we called it whiff waff. I mean, there is a lot to like about Boris Johnson on a personal level. It's just that he doesn't seem to implement the things which Conservatives want.
I mean, look what he did to Northern Ireland. But I remember when you remember the leadership race against him and Hunt. I remember him specifically saying to Northern Ireland, "If I get in, I will not force abortion and gay marriage onto you." And what does he do? His government votes. This is a Tory government, not Labour this time. Votes for abortion and gay marriage onto Northern Ireland. And look at what happened recently. He vowed that there won't be a hard sea border between Northern Ireland and the rest of Britain. What happens? There's a hard sea border implemented right now. He's completely, let the people of Northern Ireland down. You can't trust them at all. I remember my mum saying, when she first saw him in the leadership race, she said, "You can't trust the guy that's lied to his own family and cheated on his wives." And it's completely true. If he's done that to his own family, he's going to do it to the people, and we can see that right now.
I've noticed on your social media you seem to have some very strong views about Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
Do you want to go into that now?
So my dad was a soldier in Northern Ireland, so that's how I first got into it. I've been to Northern Ireland quite a number of times, and it's a topic I like to specialise in for politics and history at university. And I think it's a part of the United, an area in which a country in the United Kingdom, a lot of people tend to ignore and tend to neglect. And it is obviously, blood has literally been shed there. I mean, our own troops have died for that part to remain in the United Kingdom. It just sickens me how much we ignore it. So I think a lot of people need to look into Northern Ireland, and I think it's important that its history gets taught in our schools more as well, for the same reasons. That we
I can say certainly for me, I assume Damien as well, that the Troubles and so forth didn't really get taught for us because they were so recent.
Yeah, that's true.
Did they get taught at all for you?
Briefly, so we went into Ian Paisley and all of that. So we touched on the conflict in Northern Ireland. But I think a part which is fundamentally important that needs to be taught in schools is the reason the Republic and Northern Ireland are split originally in 1920. Because a lot of people think that we just stole Northern Ireland, when the Republic wanted independence. When the reality is that it was Edward Colson and the UVF who did everything in their power for that positive majority in Eastern Ulster to remain a part of the United Kingdom due to economic reasons, cultural reasons, and the fear that they would be mistreated in the Republic, which actually happened, if you look into it.
I'll really admit I'm not exactly well versed on Irish history, to say the least. I mean, as far as I'm aware, I know America's supported the Republic of Ireland quite a lot.
Yeah.
Do you think that creates any sort of conflict of interest with Britain at all?
I think, well, America tends to support Ireland because they had a lot of Irish immigrants, and they tend to be quite loyal to their homeland in that regard. I mean, for example, look at Biden. He claims to be more Irish than he's American, and I'm more Irish than him. I'm like 25% Irish, and he's like, what, 13%? It's ridiculous. But,
yeah, but you got to remember,
he claims to be a Catholic and supports abortion. So
yeah, I mean, the guy's.
Yes, but you got to remember, like I say, Elizabeth Warren's also Native American. So
Oh, yeah, 2% Native American. Yeah, I think that's how things work in America, isn't it? Anything but American.
I've said this in the past, because the same thing, you can spot similarities from that in other societies in the past that don't necessarily have a long-standing history. Mm-hmm. Germany did it in the early 1900s when Germany sort of just became unified. They tried to claim to a lot of historical culture. So did the Romans. I know Romans always had a fair, decent history, but that's why they tried to trace it to Greece. Greece also did the same. Tracing after the Greek Dark Age, they traced their lineages back to the Greek heroes. I think it's a way of trying to supplement a culture that isn't really there.
Yeah, that's probably quite accurate.
I've heard that a lot of Northern Irish people have ancestors from Scotland originally.
Yeah. Sorry, go on.
And it's interesting because Northern Ireland, I would say, is quite conservative. And the DUP is sort of like what the Conservative Party should be over here, I would say. But then the Scots are very left-wing. So if you could sort of say that these two people have a similar ancestry, but one's very left-wing and one's very right-wing, you could possibly make the conclusion that perhaps maybe because they're closer to conflict, that has hardened them and made them more right-mindedly conservative.
It's quite weird, like looking into why is Northern Ireland quite conservative? Because, for example, if you look at the Irish Catholics coming over to places like Liverpool, Glasgow, and Dundee for work, those areas now are like the most left-wing places in the United Kingdom. It's like, what happened to their values and beliefs? So it would be interesting to investigate that, I think.
I think there was a big shift into what conservatism stood for historically. I mean, if you read Man versus the States, it's mentioned even there, and now talking about it in the 1880s, that conservatism used to be effectively ruled by status, whereas the left used to be ruled by mercantile, so that you had more chance of working your way out. So a lot of cities used to be very pro-mercantile and so forth, and tended to be more left-wing, and the countryside used to be more right-wing because they quite like the status and everything just being as it was and being undisturbed. And then you seem to have had this little bit of a swap, especially with the North, I think, where it's just gone more left in general.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I think this is the case of the left leaving people rather than people leaving the left as such, or rather politics leaving people as a whole.
But a lot of these people up north are conservative. They just vote Labour because they're anti, middle class English Toryism, which I totally understand. That's the way I would view it, anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you the type of conservative I very much dislike, and that's some of these people who may have gone to university and they found out about the Corn Laws many years ago, and they'll say, yes, conservatism is about repealing the Corn Laws and things like that, and basically not have any social conservatism as what they define as conservatism.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine you probably come across quite a few of these people at university.
Yeah, that's most campus conservatives.
Have they mentioned the Corn Laws?
Corn Laws. I've read like, what actually is the Corn Laws? Like, I've heard it in conversation.
Oh, you don't know about it?
No.
Oh, so it was. You must know about this, Adnam, as well, right? You can tell me if I go.
Go ahead.
but it was basically the government didn't want to import corn from abroad. This was in the 1800s, right? Something like that. Yeah. And the idea was that they were protecting British farmers, and it ended up leading a lot of people to starve, basically, because the prices in Britain were too high. And so basically it was aligning, basically what these people are doing are aligning conservatism with free marketism. And I mean, this is a lot of modern day Conservative Party MPs. It's all about the free market and free trade.
Yeah, I mean that was the issue with Thatcher, really, wasn't it? Was the trickle down economics that she copied off Reagan, which is I think a big reason why the North and Scotland, for example, has turned left wing from what it used to be.
Because ultimately, if you use trickle down economics, someone has to be at the bottom. It will get to them last. And they're not going to see it as a good thing if they're getting help from it last.
So it seems to me that you don't see the Tory party as being able to be salvaged. Am I right?
Like, do I think it will become conservative again?
Yeah.
I feel like if enough people of my same beliefs play it optical and get into the party, then it might be. But there's a lot of careerists, and there's a lot of careerists who, if they find out what your beliefs are, which is socially conservative, for example, they'll kick you out of the party, or they'll suspend you instantly and all of that. So I think that's quite an issue. It's the people who won it. I think it's going to be difficult, to put it that way. But
Well, you've laid your cards on the table, I would say. Do you think it's probably hard for someone who says that the British Empire wasn't all bad?
I don't think that would be difficult, because I think a lot of Conservative MPs in Parliament also sympathise with the Empire. I know Mogg has talked positively about it in the past. So it would be weird for someone to get kicked out for just supporting the British Empire, unless we live in a time in the future where you're seen as a horrible person if you dare support it. You know what I mean?
So
interesting.
Then what do you in turn make of all these smaller parties, or the newer parties popping up, such as Heritage or Reclaim and Reform, and there are probably a couple of others I can't quite remember.
I think the issue is, if you look at the left, for example, there's only one main party that they can vote for, which is Labour. There's obviously the Green Party in that, and maybe the Lib Dems. But the right is so much more split. Like, for example, we have UKIP. Well, we used to have UKIP. We have the Reform Party, Heritage, and all these other nationalist groups. So, if we were to vote for, let's say, other parties outside the Conservative Party, it just doesn't work unless we have, proportional representation, which would be great if it was implemented. But sadly, as long as there's a two-party system, there's no chance of that ever becoming a reality.
I mean, it's fascinating you mention that, because I think even 10 years ago or so, proportional representation was seen as very much a left-wing view. But it seems to be going quite across the board now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm certainly for it. I think it's whilst it creates less strong governments, undeniably, I think it's a much more fair system if we are to have a representative democracy.
How do you think we're going to implement it if parties only vote for things which are in their interests?
How do you get the two-party system to vote against the two-party system?
Yeah.
I mean, we almost had it until the Lib Dems fucked it up.
What happened there?
There was a referendum on it back in 2011.
Too young to remember.
During the time of the coalition, it was one of 2011 United Kingdom alternative vote referendum. And
I think I actually remember that very vaguely. Yes.
Yeah, 67% no, and 32% yes. Which I think partly that was down. Obviously, it was a coalition between the Conservatives and Liberal Democrats, and it was one of the things Liberal Democrats sort of stood on.
They pushed for, yeah.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the Lib Dems shot themselves in the foot because one of the other things they stood for is not raising university fees, and then the coalition raised university fees. It also didn't help Nick Clegg being a complete wet fish.
Yes, so that died a quick death.
Yeah, sadly, because I think there was definitely momentum there to push it forward, and it was also the Liberal Democrats becoming a actual political presence. There was a chance to break a two-party system into a three-party system.
If anyone wants to drop any questions in, by the way, please do. I've been rebutted on my comment earlier as well, by the way. Someone said that Sir Desmond Swayne and Steve Baker have both piped up on hate speech.
Desmond Swayne definitely seems to be very good speaker on these sort of things.
He's very anti-lockdown as well, isn't he?
Yes, definitely. Briefly mentioning university fees, just curious, what are your thoughts on that?
I haven't really put too much thought into university.
How much are your university fees, by the way?
9,000.
9,000, okay.
Yeah, 9,000 a year.
Because did you go to university, Adnan?
No.
Okay,
that's what they got raised to. They got raised to 9,000.
Yeah, it was capped at 3,300 and something. And that's what it was for me. I only went for 1 year, but that's what it was for me. So that's quite...
I think you're about a year older than me. I think it was it changed on my year.
Yeah.
So I just thought it wasn't really worth
the
going.
presumption would be that the universities would all raise the fees depending on how good the university is. And of course, all of them raised it to 9,000, which is obviously what your one has done.
Yeah. I mean, it's not so bad because obviously, you only have to pay it when you get a certain amount of, a certain wage, which I think is like 25,000. And
but that's not going to be too much in 10 years' time. 25,000 is not going to be a high wage.
But I think you don't have to pay it back if you don't earn that before you're 40 or something.
Yeah, I think after you're 40 or so, I think it just goes away.
Yeah.
As well.
You've just got to make sure not to earn too much money.
Yeah.
I find that fascinating, though, that it's not really been something that's crossed your mind. Is that a thing in your generation in general, then? The fees at university are just seen as that's what it is?
I think there's a lot of issues going on in Britain right now, and I think university fees are the least of our worries. With the consequences of immigration, the moral fabric of our country just completely disappearing, and a generation, growing up not knowing what their country actually is and the contributions it's made. I think that's more important than university fees to think about.
Oh, certainly. I wouldn't disagree on that point. I just think it's because it was such a big thing for my generation. There was so many people kicking off about it, and I was one of those people saying no, they should be even higher because I think we should dissuade people from going to university. I think university should be for the few. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, it's not a valuable thing. If you have everyone going to university and getting degrees become devalued.
Yes, exactly.
You should be getting A's and B's, in my opinion, to get to universities, not C's.
My grades got downgraded by the government. I was on my way of getting like B's and A's, and I think I got predicted all B's by my teachers, but the government just chose to downgrade them to C's. So
that's nice of them.
Yeah, I was planning on going to Exeter originally, but I ended up at Aberdeen, sadly. I mean, it's not too bad, but there you go. There's the Tory government for you, messing up my generation.
I remember Peter Hitchens said that to basically get conservatism back in this country, you need to destroy the Conservative Party. Do you not think that maybe he might have a point there?
He might do. I don't think there's a lot of fixing it in its current state.
So did you have a year of university before the lockdown, or has it been pretty much entirely?
So I started last summer, and we were last term we were in Scotland, so all the classes were on and everything. but it's just been online the second term, which is quite disappointing. Definitely when we're paying 9,000 a year and we have to do most of the reading ourselves and we have to buy our own books. It just doesn't seem worth it.
Because there has been a lot of that argument that why should the fee still be as high when you're not getting the same experience. And I was just curious to see if there has been a big change in your university experience because of this.
Yeah, I think my university experience was much better than English students, because obviously, look at Manchester, for example. They turned up and they were locked in their rooms all day. None of their classes were in person and everything. So I'm quite thankful I ended up in Scotland, to be honest. So I kind of did have a university experience, but I have nothing to compare it to, unlike second years, because I actually don't know what university is like, to be honest.
Do you feel like you're missing out on that?
A little bit. But,
we actually have a question as well, actually, in the chat now. When the pink pendulum swings eventually, does anyone fear a rise in post-Christian right-wing politics? I'm curious as to what is meant by post-Christian.
Well, devoid of thou shalt not kill and things like that. So maybe that's what he means. More extreme, I would imagine.
Possibly, because I personally interpret post-Christian to be just more secular. And a rise in secular right-wing politics would be, I just think, quite interesting. We were having this discussion a couple of weeks ago, of course, of the integration of religion in British society and how Britain is ultimately a Christian country. We do have the Church of bloody England. It is a Christian country as much as Americans might say America's Christian. Do you have any thoughts there, religious-wise?
I mean, it obviously is a Christian country, but a lot of our moral fabric of the country has gone away. A lot of people, unlike the older generation, have no knowledge of Christianity. I mean, I remember when I did religious education in school, we would focus more on Islam than we actually would Christianity, because the teachers thought, well, you live in a Christian country, so you must know about Christianity anyway. So a lot of our generation is just completely growing up, not understanding the Bible, never touching the Bible in their lives, not understanding any of the Christian teachings. And a lot of people actually don't realize we are a church and state country. So it's kind of disappearing in a way. And that's probably why we can see atheism rising. And it's all down to this kind of liberalism and this kind of belief that morals are subjective and so on. And you don't have to follow the Bible to have a good functioning society.
What would you define, and would you define yourself as a traditional conservative?
Yeah, definitely.
So what if you had to say to someone, what is a traditional conservative? How would you describe it?
I always summed it up in like 3 terms. So traditional conservatism for me is prioritizing family, for example, because I think that's the bedrock of a society, is the nuclear family. Prioritizing country and prioritizing God as well. So those are the 3 things: God, family, and nation. I think they're the core beliefs for traditional conservatism, in a way.
Yeah, I kind of feel that religion is a fundamental part of conservatism, because a secular society, I don't see how you can conserve something unless it has strong roots. And a secular society, I don't think it really has strong conservative roots unless you're talking, quoting Winston Churchill. That's about as deep as it goes, as far as I can see.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you look at for example, if you look away from the Bible and you look, at ancient philosophers like Confucius, who actually are really the founders of traditionalism, they all empathize universal moral law, family, and respect your elders and your culture and heritage. And that was, way before the days of Plato and Buddha in ancient China. And again, you can see that in Aristotle's teachings. You can see that in the Bible. I mean, these things are universal in conserving a nation, and it's just sad that they've all been forgotten and lost. I mean, look. I mean, for example, respect. I mean, sadly, the Duke of Edinburgh has passed away today, and most of Twitter is just filled with like people making fun of him, a war hero. And he literally went against his family.
Oh, have we lost her?
I believe so. Nope. Right. Seem to have some technical difficulties there.
Oh, you're back.
Yeah, I was
You were
about to
saying
say,
that Prince Philip was going against his family.
Yeah, because a lot of his sisters got married off to to Nazis, and he supported Britain, joined their military, and was on a good career of becoming a good officer, and he chose to marry the Queen and support the country and make sacrifices, and this whole generation's ungrateful for that. I mean, people are literally saying because he went to one of his family members' funerals in Nazi Germany, and that makes him a Nazi now, despite him literally killing Nazis himself.
Yeah. He
Well,
literally.
Twitter is a funny place as well.
Yeah. I mean, just. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm curious to see whether this is going to lead to the start of the end for the royal family, because whilst he was very much a background figure, he was sort of a central pinning for it.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that if we didn't have Prince William, because I do think Prince William is a strong figure in the royal family who does have the ability to keep a lot of belief in the royal family.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I mean, that's a big reason why a lot of people don't like Charles, because they don't think the monarchy will survive under him.
Yeah, I mean, Charles isn't the worst person in the world, but he just doesn't have the same appeal, does he?
I think a lot of people don't like Charles because British society never moved off of Diana.
No.
Yeah, I mean, I remember Diana's death and how distraught everyone was over it. She was genuinely beloved by the nation, almost as much as, if not arguably more than, the Queen. And Charles then continuing on, as one has to do, and then getting the Queen and so forth, sort of just left a sour taste in people's mouth. And generally, all accounts I have heard of people who have met Charles and worked with him and so forth said he is a consummate gentleman, much like his father, and that his philanthropic work is almost the same. But obviously, he didn't do the military side of it as well, I believe, and he now has this perception of it.
Yeah, I guess he's mostly scarred from the Diana, what happened with Diana. So that's kind of made it hard for people to really accept him in the same way as someone like the Duke of Edinburgh.
It's also, am I correct in believing that he's going to be the fourth king since Henry VIII as well, which is quite worrying. But maybe that represents, the generation we're living in as well through the monarchy.
I do think we need a male heir finally again. Maybe that'll defeat political correctness when we get a king.
Oh no, we were living good in the Elizabethan era, in the Victorian times. So you can't blame it on it being female.
Well, yeah, I guess so. But there is something powerful about saying the King of England. It feels like we haven't been able to. Well, we haven't been able to say that in a long time.
Hilarious how a few years ago you had, even with the Women and Equalities Committee, that was formed. I believe it was formed under Theresa May. When you have a female prime minister and a female head of state as the Queen, you need a Women and Equalities Committee.
Yeah. Still,
of course, it's very easy for me to say that with my straight white male privilege, but
You remember when they were trying to get Parliament to be 50-50, 50% male and 50% female? That was so ridiculous.
Well, I'm pretty sure Labour still kind of wants that.
They probably do. A lot of Tory female MPs want that as well.
Do you remember Harriet Harman's campaign for Labour leader when she had a pink bus and all that kind of thing? Absolutely terrible. She's totally disappeared from the political scene now.
Thankfully.
Yeah.
There was, I mean, Jordan Peterson, I think, quite aptly put the idea that, perhaps it's just because they don't want to do the job. The question should be, why do people want to do such high-pressure jobs in the first place? Mm-hmm. But of course, as we now know, Jordan Peterson is a Nazi equivalent to Red Skull, and is about to be punched by Captain America.
What is this Red Skull thing? Because I haven't quite understood what this meme is about. How did the Red Skull meme come up?
The writer for the Captain America comics has been on it a few years now, and very, very left-wing sort of person. And in the latest incarnation, Red Skull is being portrayed as getting famous on YouTube and being a bit of an internet celebrity, and having a direct, it's listed as 10 rules for life, and effectively taking slightly changed quotes from Jordan Peterson, which again I just find absolutely hilarious. How do you go from tidy your room, he must be a Nazi?
Wow, that's bizarre.
I suppose it's because, he kind of wants people to take responsibility for their own lives, and he wants people to manifest into something better, which is what a lot of the left quite reject, to be honest. They want the state to support them. They don't want to do anything themselves.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think people are pushing away from personal responsibility, or in some cases pushing back towards it?
It kind of reminds this sounds so cringe. You know Ted Krasinski? So his book, I think it was the Unabomber Manifesto. Yeah. I don't support terrorism, by the way, but he went. he went.
So last week we had a whole conversation about the Rivers of Blood speech with Enoch Powell. Now we're going into Ted Krasinski. Okay, this is going to be a fun show.
He's an anarchist, so it's not so bad, right? Anarchism is acceptable to talk about. But anyway, no, he was going into the psychology of the left, and he was kind of talking about how the left like being in an industrial society because they don't have to do much, because they can rely on the state, because it doesn't take much energy, which is why they quite appeal to things such, the state doing everything for them. Whilst people on the right, for example, are a bit more independent. They want to be free from that type of stuff. So I suppose it's like a difference in psychology, really. The differences with the left and the right, and maybe the new generation we're living in. But it's a complicated question, I suppose.
Well, I work as an electrician, and I don't know anyone in the trades who is left-wing. They're all right-wing. All voted for Brexit, all against mass immigration and things like that.
Yeah.
I mean,
There's
they live
a trend in the working classes being definitely more right-wing, at very least even in small conservative terms, of just wanting to be left alone and being able to get on with it.
Yeah, because they're working on the graft of their own hands as well, so they have a different perception of the world. I think that probably plays a part into it as well.
And then there's also a lot of people, I think a lot of left do see themselves as working class. I think a lot of the journalists especially do.
Yeah, they like to pretend to. I think I had some journalists telling me they're working class because they're a journalist, which doesn't make any sense, because working class refers to people in jobs of labour, for example. And they were trying to pull out, a victim card saying, well, my job doesn't pay well. So that, that makes me a working class citizen.
How much you're earning. I think it's quite simple for working classes. If you can work from home, you're not working class.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's true.
Name me one working class job you can do from home.
Bitcoin miner? No idea. Have you tried to red pill many people on conservatism who aren't conservative?
So I used to be a TikToker, which is quite cringe to say. I used to be quite popular there. I used to make British Empire content, believe it or not.
Yeah, I think that's actually where I first saw some of your stuff before the whole Aberdeen thing.
Which is
I realised I was following you on Twitter before that.
Yeah, it's just pretty ironic that I got kicked out for saying Rule Britannia, even though I was known for that anyway. Basically, I started off on TikTok actually calling out a lot of neoconservatives and so on. So I was able to like convince a lot of people of what actual conservatism was about, and it wasn't about this like free market capitalism and so on that actually had traditional roots, and it meant taking up moral values and so on. So I think I've convinced a lot of people. I don't know how many though.
Is TikTok? I've seen these things of people on TikTok doing conservative. I don't know what you call them. TikToks. But is this just like a small audience, or did these videos actually reach a lot of people?
I think they reached a lot of people. I think the most views I got on one of my videos was 100,000, which was
Are you
quite a
kidding
lot.
me?
Yeah,
100,000.
yeah.
Wow.
That was on the British Empire one. Yeah, I annoyed a lot of people on TikTok. A lot of it is quite radically left wing, and a lot of it is anti-empire. So they thought, it's just as bad as Nazis for their saying I support the British Empire, which fought the Nazis, ironically.
Mm. Do you see yourself possibly moving to another party after the Tories?
I don't know. I don't know. It's like, is there any party which can properly compete against the Tories? That's the issue. I feel like sometimes we need to unify the right. And I feel like the issue with the Tory party is that they try to appeal more to the left, when in reality they should actually be appealing more to the right, which are voting for parties such as Reform and what was UKIP. But they don't choose to do that, and that's why a lot of them.
I think they're not so much trying to go to the left, but more the centre. Perhaps.
Yeah.
There is definitely a more traditionally right-wing aspect of the Conservative Party that is being completely ignored.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's a bit of a weird circumstance where the natural people they should be appealing to, in my opinion, is the working class.
Mm-hmm.
And they are more conservative, but they don't like the Tories because the Tories, well, they basically don't like working class people, a lot of them.
Or they just keep ignoring them, as we see now. They'll say, yeah, we'll sort out the immigration issue, and then they just.
Do either of you think this could be a case of the Conservatives becoming complacent with the more right-wing side of their party just being there, much in the same way Labour has done with the North in general, its working class members? And it's all taken them for granted, and they've started to have enough.
Yeah, I think that's what's happening as well. So obviously, we were able to gain so much of the working class vote, but now we're just neglecting them and just taking those votes for granted. And so I think in the next election, unless the Tory party actually does something to help them out, then they're just going to vote maybe for Labour again, or another party.
So you think the Northern Wall might collapse for the Tories?
Yeah, I think so. I think the Northern Wall only voted for the Tories for two reasons, which was Brexit and immigration. And they've mucked up Brexit with Northern Ireland, and they've mucked up immigration. So I don't think it's worked out so well.
I think that's probably a third reason. I think that was more just not Jeremy Corbyn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe.
I mean, if the Tories are going to lose the Northern Wall, but then you've also got Keir Starmer, who's very unpopular at the moment, I would say, as well. I'm wondering if he's going to survive into the next election, past the next election, I should say.
I mean, quite frankly, Keir Starmer's got an open goal here by opposing vaccine passports and so forth. That will win a lot of people over to Labour. Even if
I think you're a bit. I would say you're a little bit naive about that, Adnan, because I don't think quite as many British people are supportive as we are against vaccine passports and things like that.
I mean domestically, not internationally.
Domestically. Well, Yeah, I guess there's something to say about that. I think people would have to experience it for a while to really be unhappy with it.
Like we've had to experience lockdowns for a while.
Yeah, but then people have gotten used to that, it seems.
If people remember, right at the start of the lockdowns, the government was saying, we cannot let this become the new normal. We must make sure we remember what it was like to go back to, so we go back to normal. And very quickly that changed to the new normal, using exactly the same phrase. And I just found that fascinating that no one seemed to clock that.
The new normal. There's something about that phrase which is just very off-putting.
Yeah. You know, a lot of right wingers like to say everything's 1984. You know, but it is kind of true, isn't it? Definitely with lockdown. I mean, a couple of years ago we were comparing everything to 1984 because of terms of freedom of speech, and now it's just gotten a lot worse. Where we can compare like the lockdown measures to what George Orwell was warning us about, and that book, we have to remember, served as a purpose, as a warning. It wasn't fiction. I think we kind of took it for granted, really.
I mean, people seem to also forget that Orwell was an open communist.
I mean,
before he saw the light.
Yeah. I mean, he was an open communist until like after the Spanish Revolution.
Yeah.
The Civil War, yeah.
If there were any historical figures, particularly British ones, I guess, you had to give high regard to that maybe not so many people know about, who would you say?
Ian Paisley.
Ian Paisley. Oh, wow. We're big fans of Ian Paisley.
That man had balls.
Yeah.
A lot of these like politicians we see now, they're like scared to, really, really support anything. They're always yes mans to the Tory party, and they don't have guts to stick up for anything they believe in. But Ian Paisley, I mean, I don't support his sectarianism. The fact that he went into the EU Parliament, held up a sign saying the Pope is the Antichrist, and truly stuck up for his country is something that I think people should look up to. I mean, the only person who he would let him boss him about was God, and he put God first, and that's why I kind of respect him a lot. He never surrendered, did he?
Interesting.
And I think the second one would be Enoch Powell as well. I think he was a man who truly cared about this country, a man who wasn't scared to say what he actually knew to be true. And I think that's a figure in British history we took for granted as well. We've only really taken him seriously, after he died.
Yeah, I think we're still feeling the repercussions of his legacy in a way. He was kind of the beginning of the modern conservative backlash, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just look what they did to him,
One of the greatest prime ministers we never had.
Yeah, the greatest prime minister we never had was Ian Paisley. He could have become prime minister if he wasn't part of the DUP.
I mean, people might say that about de Gaulle. That he was
the greatest thing about Enoch Powell and Ian Paisley, they were actually like good friends as well. Because obviously, Enoch Powell went to Northern Ireland and ran there after he got kicked out of the Tory party. So, those two people stuck together, and I think that they're the two greatest figures in modern British history that are quite underrated.
I reckon the DUP should stand a candidate somewhere in England or something like that, just to see what happens. I'd vote for them.
I'll definitely vote for them.
Yeah, but then that leads to the SNP doing the same.
Do you think anyone's going to vote for the SNP in England, though? Because it's like the only main.
I'm sure there's someone.
Yeah, maybe.
There's a strong enough movement in England of people just getting fed up with Scotland shit.
I feel like if Sinn Féin was to run anywhere in England, I feel like Liverpool would elect them. Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, probably. That would be a much. I would prefer to have the SNP versus the DUP as the two-party system rather than Tory and Labour, which is Blairite versus Blairite.
What do you think that would be like?
awesome. Ian Paisley versus Nicola Sturgeon. In fact, who is the leader of the DUP now? I've forgotten.
Foster.
Arlene Foster. Oh yeah, of course it is. But there's the other. Who's the one that we really like? It's like a older man. I think he lost his seat at one point recently. But then,
I forgot his name, but I know the face. He lost it in Belfast, I think.
yeah, he's one of the few
He was really good.
good MPs. Yeah.
He could have been the second coming of Paisley, really, if he didn't lose.
Yeah, if you were going to have a successor to Paisley, it would probably be him. If I could remember his name. If anyone's watching this now, can you remember who this guy is? Because he was used to be interviewed a lot on the BBC. Anyway, we're not going to get it today.
But of course, speaking of the SNP and stuff, do you think that Scotland will go independent?
No. For example, the big reason why people actually vote for the SNP in Scotland is because they think that Labour and the Tories just neglect Scotland. So they don't vote for it because of issues like independence. A lot of them are against Scotland leaving the United Kingdom, but it's more due to like economic reasons and so on.
What about Alex Salmond's new party then? Do you think that's going to get anywhere?
No, I don't think it is. Not, to be honest. There's is it George Galloway? He set up a new party for Scotland, the Workers' Party. I don't think that's going to go anywhere either.
To be honest, I can't think of George Galloway without thinking of his appearance on Big Brother.
Never watched it.
Oh God. Okay. George Galloway pretending to be a cat. Look it up, mate.
I've seen that.
Galloway on Big Brother.
It's
I
Nigel.
remember more for that than anything else.
I think it's Nigel Dodds who we're thinking of, by the way. I've just looked it up. Yeah, George Galloway.
Scotland did leave the Union, though. Would you think that would cause a cascading effect?
I think that would be the end of Britain, quite literally, because Britain refers to the island, while Wales and Scotland and England is on. I don't think there would be a future for our country if Scotland left, to be quite honest. I mean, the issue is, what would the flag look like? And obviously it would be a lot smaller. Well, I think
on the plus side, we could rebuild Hadrian's Wall.
Yeah, maybe.
There are some people that think that if Scotland left, then that would make the English revert more inwards and actually move more in a conservative direction, more of an English nationalist direction, and that would actually solve the problem. Do you think that could be possible?
I don't think Scotland's the biggest threat to conservatism, to be honest. I think it is, for example, the fact that we've lost a lot of our moral fabric in England, and I would probably say that there's English cities which are far more left-wing than Scotland is, to be honest. I think they're the biggest issue. I think if we got rid of London, to be honest, that would solve a lot of our issues. If we just put like a massive glass globe over London, and
you could just fill the
lockdown for London, that would just solve everything. Because obviously, Londoners are just completely oblivious to anything outside of London, and it's just extremely left-wing, which is why a lot of conservatives in London are really just Labour supporters up north, if you could say.
I think there's perhaps an argument for London getting a bit more devolved as such, or being separated from the UK politically, in the same way that Washington DC is in America.
That would be good.
I mean, I support the federalist system. So I do believe in an English parliament. Do you support that?
No, I think the only country within the United Kingdom that should have its own parliament is Northern Ireland, and that used to be that way for quite a long time. So Stormont used to be the only, the sole power within the United Kingdom. But I don't support the Welsh Parliament, the Scottish Parliament. I think, there should be only one Parliament in London, and that's it.
But doesn't that solve the problem of, a lot of Welsh and Scottish people saying these English people telling us what to do,
I think it's become quite worse, actually. Definitely in Scotland, because they can use Brexit to say that the English are forcing us out of the EU against our will. So I don't think that solved the issue at all.
I think it's like often Scotland views it as England, Northern England views it as the South. But Dave and I are both from the South, and it's not us. It's London.
It's London. It is. It's always London. London and its consequences.
Yeah, we need to wall it off, definitely.
We need Hadrian's Wall for London.
I mean, in fairness, that's just the 25.
Or we could get like Boadicea to come back to life and burn London down. That would be great. Or the Celtics unite and go against London.
Oh, that'd be interesting.
Someone here has put Aberdeen is great and right wing. I don't know if you can confirm that.
Aberdeenshire, it's quite conservative. I definitely would say. The city itself, it's not as bad as Dundee and Glasgow. It's much more right wing in that aspect. But
how would you judge it? How would you judge a city to be right wing anyway? What would you notice about it?
That's it.
Less LGBT flags and things like that.
Definitely.
That was the first thing that came to my mind as well. How many pride flags?
I think in Scotland it would be, does this city support Scottish independence? I think that's the main question. But cities tend to be extremely left wing anyway.
Yeah, I mean, there's no conservative cities, is there? I mean, maybe like York or something. I don't know.
I was trying to think actually. You could say Belfast. Half of Belfast is DUP, isn't it? That's about it.
Someone's asking here, have you heard of the Scottish Family Party? Very small but growing.
No, never heard of them.
Oh, not growing quite fast enough then.
But again, that might just be the problem with a lot of smaller parties at the moment, that no one has heard of them.
I think I only
then again, turn of the century, no one had heard of the Labour Party.
I think I only heard about the Heritage Party because of David Curtin. That's about it.
Well, that's the main driver to the base of the Heritage Party. But I mean, I had hope that Nigel Farage would carry on as leader in Reform UK, because it seemed to me that he was one of the last people who could break that two-party system.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
You have a lot more faith in Farage than I do.
Well, it's obvious to say, but he did get us Brexit.
Yeah. But beyond that, he doesn't really seem to stand for much. He seems to be more interested in being a political figure than having policies.
Yeah.
Which was one of the problems with UKIP, that there was no set of policies. It was always behind a figure, whether it was Farage or Batten or Brain or Walker or whoever. It was behind a figure rather than a set of policies.
But I feel that a lot of Conservatives need some kind of leading figure. I don't know why that is.
I don't think it's just Conservative. I think politically we need more strong politicians. 10 years ago, you could name lots of major politicians that were big, heavy names. Who have we got now? I mean, even those in the cabinet aren't exactly big names. They've all come out of nowhere. There's no one that that's like, what, Jacob Rees-Mogg? That's about it. And even then, he's not exactly a heavy hitter, because what has he done in the past 5 years?
Well, no, he's a free marketeer type Conservative. There's a name for this. I'm not quite sure. Neoconservatism? I don't know.
No, he's definitely not neoconservative, because he's far more traditionalist than most MPs in the Conservative Party. Because obviously.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, socially, I guess. Yeah.
I mean, there was a lot of controversy when he came up. Sorry, go on.
Someone's commented that they believe Farage would probably be up for reintroducing the gold standard. I think actually he would be, because he used to be working markets up in the city. So honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if he did support the gold standard. But, sorry, you were saying?
Oh no, wait, what was I saying? I actually forgot. Sorry.
Oh, never mind. I do feel like we are just one future Ian Paisley or Enoch Powell away from reigniting that flame, though. I think Farage was a taste of what could come in the future, because Farage is great, but he doesn't really speak to the soul, I think, of a lot of conservatives. He does to some, but not to all. And so it just needs one major figure, I think.
I mean, America has that all sorted out at the moment. Have you ever heard about Nick Fuentes?
Yeah.
Oh, I love Nick Fuentes. Yeah.
So he was able to turn people against neoconservatives. Those people who want to prioritize foreign policy more than their own people. And because he's this great personality with charisma, a lot of people were able to get behind him. We don't have that in Britain. I mean, we have like Sargon, who's not that charismatic, and he doesn't have that flame. We have like Paul Joseph Watson, who I have nothing against the guy, but he's quite irritating.
He speaks very clumsily.
It's almost like a shock jock for the internet.
Yeah,
we don't really have a lot of people. So we need someone like Nick Fuentes in Britain, I think. But who is it going to be?
I feel that unfortunately, many of the people who are more traditionally conservative, many who get politically active, become quite cynical, and they end up moving more to the sort of patriotic alternative type politics, which is not.
Did you see when they tried to copy the Goiper movement, patriotic alternative? No.
Go on, tell us.
So they were like copying their the Pepe Goiper things. Well, no, that movement's terrible. Like I think it was a failure when it started up, because obviously Mark Collett and all of that, and a lot of their members are former members of National Action. I don't know where they thought it was going to go from that. But yeah, I think that there is a lot of people who kind of go to that rabbit hole of patriotic alternative. But a lot of people realizing what that movement is, it's just a complete joke.
We seem to, in Britain, for some reason, we seem to swing quite far one way or the other. There's not a big middle ground for political activism between Turning Point and patriotic alternative. But that's where most people lie in the country.
Yeah, it used to be like that in America, though, before Nick Fuentes. It used to be like Turning Point USA or, Richard Spencer. So you need someone to be that middle ground, I think.
Yeah. Well, you can only hope and wish.
Going into politics in terms of going for an office or something?
Maybe. Maybe I'll go to Northern Ireland and join the DUP.
Join Heritage Party. We'll promote you.
Just the issue is, I feel like again we need to unite, all these conservative parties. So I don't think there's any chance of small parties getting elected on their own unless we have proportional representation.
We need a figure to unite them.
Exactly.
I would say, yeah. Who knows where that's going to come from, though? We'll have to see.
Okay. I think a lot of people thought that was going to be Boris.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but look how that turned out. So
we need a Zuma. That's what we need. Someone of the new generation.
Yeah, we'll see. Well, okay, we've gone on for just over an hour and a half there. I think we can wrap it up. It was great speaking to you, and good luck. Do you have any ambitions about going into politics?
I think so, but no ambition yet of running for office. But I'm definitely gonna be around influencing it, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a YouTube channel. It's called Eno2. We're going to be uploading political content on there soon. If anyone's interested in subscribing.
You say we? It's more than just you.
No, sorry. So it's just me. It's just me.
Oh.
You got to trust the plan anyway.
Okay, that's interesting. I'll put a link to that in the description then.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, great. Thanks for talking to us.
Thank you.